As many of you may know, I've been struggling a bit making videos lately because I'm a bit low on time. Hey, wait a minute. Well, that got me thinking about the famous Mario Kart track Tock clock. This has always been one of my favorites in the entire series as it managed to use the setting of a clock really well in its track design. But more importantly, did you know that this track is actually based on a level from the mainline series? That's right, this track is inspired by a Mario 64 level known as Tock clock. I mean, maybe, I don't know, who's to say. In Mario 64, I would say Tock clock is one of the most unique themes of the main levels, and is also what I believe to be Mario 64's most challenging stage. Welcome to another episode of Level by Level. Today I want to take a look at Tock clock and explore how well it utilizes clock theming. Being one of Mario 64's hardest levels, I also want to talk about what makes it so difficult and if I thought it was done well. As always with this series, we're going to be splitting this up into 3 parts. First we'll talk about the stage's aesthetic, then we'll move on to the layout, and finally we'll go through all 7 of the level stars and rank them on a tier list. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's just jump right in. Alright, kicking us off with the aesthetic, I think it's safe to say that this is absolutely Tock clock's strong suit. I mean, just looking at the name makes it pretty obvious what the stage is based on. No, it's not based on the app. What are you talking about? It's actually based on a clock, as I've said like 5 times within the first minute of this video. Before we even get into the stage, I want to comment on the stage entrance. I usually don't do that with these videos, but this is easily one of my favorite entrances for the main levels. Once you get up to the upstairs, you're put in this room with a giant grandfather clock in the center. This is perfectly fitting for the level, and I've always just liked the look of this. Now, I'll have more to say about the entrance in the layout section, but I think we should get into the actual stage itself. To fit with the grandfather clock, the colors in the level are mostly a mix of yellow and brown, which pretty distinctly sets it apart from any other stage in the game or even the series. To go with that, a lot of the elements of the stage are also mechanical. A lot of the ground is made up of cages, and there are a ton of clock parts thrown throughout the level. One other pretty interesting visual touch is the heavy amount of fog in this course. I can't really explain why they would have done this, but I actually like the inclusion as it makes the stage feel more daunting, especially so as you climb up higher and higher and the fog engulfs the ground below you. The fog is coming, the fog is coming, the fog is coming. So all around, this stage is fantastic when it comes to the visual department. It perfectly nails the feel of a clock and stands out very distinctly from the rest of the game. And then of course we have to talk about the auditory aesthetic. Before we get to the song, I have to say that the mechanical elements do a great job adding to the ambience as you can hear them moving throughout the course. The stage really feels busy with all of its moving parts, and the sound effects help a lot with that. As for the song in this stage, it uses the slide theme. Now I've gone on record calling out a few levels that use this theme without it fitting very well, but I think Tock clock is an exception. Being one of the most chaotic stages in the game with all of its moving parts, a fast-paced, intense song fits right in. While an exclusive theme would have been nice, I think this song was certainly the next best thing. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I think it's safe to say that Tock clock is one of Mario 64's best. But now it's time we move on to the layout of the stage, and this is actually one of the most interesting layouts to talk about out of any of the Mario 64 stages we've covered so far. First off, I want to start with looking back at the stage entrance because I think it already does a great job with setting the scene of the stage. In order to actually enter the level, you have to go inside the clock part at the top, but due to it being high up, it requires Mario to do something other than just a normal jump to reach it. That makes the stage a bit harder to enter than most others, which fits well with how much more difficult the actual stage is. Once you enter inside, you can see that this stage is laid out to be significantly more vertical than any other level in the game. While most stages have something to climb up, that's pretty much the entire point of Tock clock. I mean, I guess the same for Tall Mountain, but more like Tall Mid-Tin, got him. Essentially, Tock clock acts as a giant cylinder with you having to platform in a circle around the edges. For all you kiddos out there, it's basically Tower of Hell from Roblox. That makes Tock clock one of the game's most platforming-centric levels, made even harder with how many of the platforms are moving around as you make your way up. The fact that this is so vertical also makes falling extremely devastating as you lose a ton of progress with each missed jump. The moving platforms are also great inclusions as they fit very well with the clock theming. Obviously, people think of movement and mechanical parts when a clock comes to mind, so they managed to capture that with the stage's obstacles very well. But there's also another part of this level that fits with the clock theme that I haven't mentioned yet. I'm honestly not sure which of my categories this should fall into, but layout seems like the most reasonable. As the footage has been rolling in the background, you may have noticed that the moving parts of the stage have pretty variable timings between clips. Well, that's because this course actually lets you choose the speed of the elements before going in from 4 different options. The elements will either be perfectly still, slow, fast, or move randomly. I think that's a fantastic mechanic because it again fits perfectly with the clock theme. I mean, you're literally messing with the timing of the stage's obstacles. But something that I think makes this even better is the fact that it's a bit of a puzzle. So you don't get to just select the speed when you enter the stage from a menu. Instead, you have to try and figure out that the placement of the minute hand on the clock's entrance correlates with the speed of the elements. I absolutely love this idea. Changing the speed of the elements isn't technically required for any star, but it certainly makes some of them much easier to accomplish. So figuring out this puzzle acts as a bit of a reward for observant players. Whenever you enter the stage, you're very likely to do it with a different minute hand placement each time, meaning you should eventually notice that the timing changes, especially if you end up getting the still variant. I remember when I played this for the first time, I thought I glitched the game with everything being frozen. Man, I was stupid. But I think this entrance puzzle adds a lot to the stage both thematically and gameplay wise. There are some things I don't like about this gimmick, which I'll mention later when we get to the stars, but overall the idea and execution was very strong and just helps make the stage more unique. Alright, now I think it's a good time to move over to our star tier list. I've quite enjoyed the aesthetic and layout so far, so let's see if the stars are going to be able to keep up the pace. Star number 1, roll into the cage. This star is a pretty simple introduction to the course, just requiring us to climb up the stage a little bit to reach it. When you start, you get this nice open area to run around on. Be careful of the bombs. There are technically 2 ways to get up, but most people will probably go down this path of the pendulum. First off, the pendulums are just great obstacles. Obviously, we're inside a grandfather clock, so they fit extremely well, and they act as good ways to block our jumps if we aren't paying attention. After the pendulum, we have a few more obstacles such as a conveyor belt and rotating block. These guys are both used throughout the level, so introducing them early on is a great idea. Just in case someone falls here, they won't be losing too much progress, which gives them a chance to learn how these obstacles work. We actually get to see these obstacles ramp up a bit with another pendulum jump and a staircase made up of 3 rotating blocks. One nice thing about this element is that they always indicate right before they're about to turn, which is helpful to know exactly when you should jump. I also really like trying to skip the entire staircase by wall jumping whenever I come here. It's pretty satisfying. But then we've got the level's most dangerous obstacle. Yeah, there are some parts of the wall that try to push you off throughout the stage. For the most part, they're pretty easy to avoid, but I think the inclusion is cute to keep us on our toes. Once we get past that, we can walk along another big cage platform, though this time we have to be careful of getting set on fire. There's also a clock hand that goes around here, but it's not too hard to just jump over it. But that brings us to the home stretch of this star. We have to climb up a few gear platforms, which are not that hard, and then we reach the cage. To get inside, you have to jump off a gear onto a conveyor, which I think works as a good culmination of a few of this level's obstacles. Once inside, it's pretty easy to snag the star, and I think this works really well as an introduction to the stage. You get to see a lot of the stage's elements, but don't have to climb all the way up to the top. The only thing holding this back is that you do have to go down this route for almost every star, which makes it a bit repetitive, but seeing as this is the first star, I think that's fine, so I'll give this a solid B tier. Star number 2, the pit and the pendulums. As the name implies, we're going to be dealing with the pendulum obstacle we saw with the first star. That includes those first 2 because we have to climb past them again in order to reach this new area. In fact, in order to get this star, we need to climb all the way back up to where we just got rolled into the cage, but this time we jump over the cage. Once you're up there, you have to go down on a ramp and ride up an elevator block to a pole. But be careful! Surrounding the pole is the dastardly amp! If you just climb the pole, it can't touch you. One thing I like about this pole is the fact that climbing it gives you a 1-up, which is going to especially come in handy with the later stars of this course. Sticking with this star for now though, we have to run past a heave-ho. It's pretty easy to avoid due to being in an open area, but can cause some trouble if you're trying to hit these coin blocks. Oh, and before we continue this star, above this area there's actually a hidden 1-up which requires you to jump across a bunch of moving parts. I personally think this is a pretty cool Easter egg. Anyway, moving past the heave-ho, there's this gap which you can cross by using this triangle platform, but I personally always just long jump. And now it's time to face the pendulums the star is named after. You can see the star across from you on this thin pathway, but to reach it, you have to run past 2 pendulums and this random moving block. Due to how skinny the pathway is, it can be quite nerve-wracking to go across this, even if the gaps here are super tiny. Personally though, whenever I do this star, I like to just long jump across. Okay, that was a little close. But overall, I'd say this star is just about as good as the first. I'll place it right next to it in B tier, with this star getting a slight edge because it's longer and a bit more difficult. Star number 3, get a hand. Okay, now what? This star is quite different from the stars we got before, as this takes a bit more puzzle solving. To get this, you need to return to the area with the flame spitter from before. If you remember, I mentioned that there was a clock hand here. And if you don't remember, you should be concerned, that was like 2 minutes ago. While judging by the name of the star, you may be able to figure out that you have to do something with this, but what isn't fully clear. I always like when you can use the names of stars as helpful hints for puzzles. If you try writing on top of the hand, you may eventually notice that it actually brings you into an alcove with the star. I think that's just a really solid puzzle, perfectly fitting for a clock-based stage. Now, there is a little bit more I want to add on here before moving on. This is the first of the stars that I'd say is heavily affected by the time control gimmick. The others can obviously be helped, but this one especially so, as the hand itself is based around the timing. So if you want to do the star faster, try and get the minute hand to be on the 9 before entering. However, if you enter the stage with the time stopped, that could be a bit of a problem, but luckily due to the star's placement, you can still collect it by jumping down from a high place. So overall, I think this star works great with the mechanics since it's still possible in any state. For having a fairly creative and fitting puzzle, I'm gonna put the star up in A tier. I thought it was pretty cool. Star number 4, Stomp on the Thwomp. This is what I'd say is TikTok Clock's biggest star of the main 6, which makes it a bit weird to be at number 4 on the list, but I'll explain why I like that a bit later. This has us climbing all the way up to the very top of the level, which means we've got quite the journey ahead of us. Luckily, we've already covered a lot of it with Pit and the Pendulum, so we could just start our coverage from the pole area. Instead of moving toward the heave-ho, we can go towards this heart. I like this heart being here as it can help you heal from fall damage, which is very likely to happen on this course. Once you get up there, you'll see another elevator block which brings you up to multiple moving elements. It can be pretty challenging to make this jump just because of the depth perception, so always make sure to be very careful when you do it. To continue up, you have to jump across a few more spinning blocks. This expands on the staircase we saw before by spreading out the blocks more, which I think is a great way to build up the challenge. Once you make a few more jumps up to this path, we see an absolutely terrifying sight. 4 wall pushers in a row. You can't jump over them because there's a cage on top. Oh. Well, assuming you can't wall jump, you're forced to go through them under a low ceiling, which I think is a great way to build on this obstacles challenge. Speaking of obstacles we've seen before, we then get a bunch of conveyors in a staircase. These are actually a bit more deadly than you may expect. Due to their height, it's very likely Mario will only ledge grab them from a jump, which can easily lead to him being pulled off the side. This is a really creative way to build on the conveyors. The ledge grab thing can definitely catch some people off guard. Continuing up the path, we have a few of these thin spinning platforms, which are near the beginning of the level for a different star. Then after that, we have some rotating triangles to climb up, which are a bit of a different take on the blocks from before. That's a really cool switch up, as the different shape makes the rotation a bit more scary. But then once you finally reach the top, there's no thwomp. Yeah, sorry, he got arrested. No, what you actually have to do is ride on top of another clock hand, which brings you to the thwomp. It's not too hard to jump on his head from here to finally finish off the star. This was a great platforming challenge through pretty much everything this level has to offer. All of the elements evolve to get harder as it goes, and it's overall just really fun. The only real problem I can think of is the time changing mechanic, as the star can be hurt by it. Because you have to ride a clock hand at the end, it gets really difficult to complete this star with time stopped. At the same time though, it's kind of a fun challenge. You have to be pretty creative to get around a lot of this level's moving parts, so honestly, I like this star when time is stopped. So for that, I'm putting this up in S tier, as it's very challenging and utilizes the stage's elements perfectly. Star number 5, time jumps on moving bars. This is probably the level's most forgettable star. To get it, you have to climb up until you reach these 2 spinning blocks. Instead of climbing them, move on to this cage area where you'll see 3 moving bars on the wall. To get this star, you have to use them as platforms, which I think is a cool expansion on the obstacle, as it changes how it's been used throughout the course up until this point. The gems do require some pretty decent timing, but luckily there's a cage underneath to catch you, so it's not too hard. Once you climb up the 3 bars, you can get inside the cage and grab the star. Yeah, there's not really much else to say on this one other than it's pretty solid, so I'm just gonna put this up in B tier as well. Star number 6, stop time for red coins. First off, I really like that this star is the last one on the list. This is the only red coin star to be the final one in its respective stage list, but I think that's for a good reason. As the name implies, this star heavily suggests that you use the time changing mechanic in order to stop time. Putting the red coin star at the end of the list allows players to have time to find the time changing mechanic out for themselves as they collect the other 5 stars. The name here also suggests that you can stop time in the first place, which may get players to think harder about what actually controls the time. I think that's really cool, and you'll see why they want you to stop time once you get to the star itself. Now, red coin missions require us to collect 8 red coins to spawn in the star. They usually either have the red coins spread out across the entire stage, or have the red coins concentrated in one area, and Tick-Tock Clock falls into the latter category. You can find the 8 red coins basically right next to the start of the level, which has a giant wall of thin spinning platforms. Now, I really appreciate that this is at the start of the level, because then people won't have to climb all the way up, only to discover they needed to enter the stage with the time stopped. Now, the reason you need that time stopped is because these platforms are a nightmare to try and climb while they spin. It is possible to collect all these coins while they're spinning, especially since you can jump down from the top section.
But why? Why would you do that?
If you do have time stopped though, it's not too bad to climb up this and collect all the coins, making the focus of the star really just figuring out the clock puzzle. Since I like that mechanic quite a bit, and they executed this fairly well, I think this deserves to be an A tier. Not quite an S, since I think this could have been made a bit harder, but I do enjoy this as is. Star number 7, 100 coin. Okay, this is going to be a tricky one to talk about. 100 coin stars are always the most challenging to analyze, since obviously people could take any 100 coins they want to complete this star. For Tick-Tock Clock, it's especially difficult though because of one major issue I've neglected to mention up until this point: invisible walls. Invisible walls exist in every level of Mario 64. There's a great video from Pen and Coic that showcases all of them and why they happen that I highly suggest watching. Of the stages though, Tick-Tock Clock is easily the most egregious in both the amount of invisible walls and the consequences for hitting one. Since this level is all about platforming up a tower, hitting an invisible wall is almost sure to kill you or set you back quite a ways. These are really easy to run into by accident. Heck, I wasn't even trying to and I managed to get hit by one while getting footage. This affects every star in the stage, but is really bad with the 100 coin star, as you have to explore pretty much every corner of the level top to bottom, so getting hit by a wall after collecting a bunch of coins is extremely frustrating. With the invisible walls in mind, how is the coin collecting itself? Well, there are 128 total coins, giving a bit of wiggle room but not too much, which I think is fair enough for such a challenging stage. A lot of the coins are found within blocks around the level, most of them containing 10 coins by themselves. I think that's a decent way to make this 100 coin star stand out, and it's pretty fun to collect the 10 coins spewing out as quickly as possible. One other important thing to mention is the blue coin switch, which is found near the pendulum star. You have to hit the switch and then run across a skinny platform to get the coins. I think there's a pretty good use of the switch, as it can actually be quite scary to run across this platform. Oh, yep, there he goes. So overall, I think the coins are well placed, but since you have to climb up to the top here, the invisible walls are super obnoxious. I was really struggling to figure out where to place this, because I like the challenge of exploring, but having the thought of being murdered at any point in the back of my head was always annoying. So I'm gonna place this at the bottom of B tier. I was considering C, but since I do have fun with this star when it manages to work, I thought B tier was fair. So with the start tier list completed, what do I think TikTok Clock's ranking should be in our Mario 64 level by level tier list? Well, the aesthetic was done phenomenally, and that's only boosted by the stage's layout incorporating a lot of moving parts. Add on that I pretty much liked every star in this course, with the only exception being the somewhat iffy 100 coin star. I think TikTok Clock deserves to rank quite highly. I love me some difficulty, and due to how much platforming there is here, it's safe to say that this is Mario 64's hardest level. So for me, I'm putting it at the very top of the tier list in S tier. As I continue this series, we'll just have to see if it ends up being my favorite level in the game. But anyways, that's it for this video. Are you a big fan of the fire spitter at the top of the clock and hate me for not mentioning them? Let me know in the comments. I really like making these Mario 64 episodes, and I think in the future I really want to do some episodes on both Sunshine and Galaxy as well. Obviously I already have plenty of Odyssey episodes, and I do still have quite a few kingdoms I want to make big videos for, but moving between all the games seems really fun. Before we go, I gotta make sure to thank my members, being MadZio2, Shrugface Ryan, Miss Jades a lot, I am not Denny BG, Bort Loco, Gnarled, Yanni the Duck, Anders Valerio, SMA, B Major 2003, Arson the Raboot, Sir Musty, Kid Trunks 15, Belandor, Puggles Are Fun, Trader Mo, The Fog, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Prunzel Clone, Thicky Reiki, SJ100, Ungenio TM, CW McCain, Tibby, JubeTube, Z, Tesseract Nuclear, Mr. McMahon 5702, Sebi, Hippopotamus, Thick Rib, Jameson Pageson, Wilbur, Golden Sin 15, Frost, Stuffy Ant, Just Dex, Concanut, Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.